New Age, the law of attraction, the secret, manifestation, astrology, numerology, heal other people through energy. There's a lot of cultish communities. There's a ton of blind faith. I don't care what, spiritual practice you subscribe to. And I think it sets people up for failure. Oh God, spiritual bypassing is a huge. If you want to grow in intelligence in any capacity, you have to do it as a dummy. Spiritual Intelligence for Dummies. My name is Matt Kim. I'm really excited you're here because we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about a lot of awesome things. And in this first episode, I really want to tackle 3 things. And if we could do that, I think we're in great shape. Number 1 is spiritual intelligence for dummies. Like, what does that even mean, right? What is spiritual intelligence? And then a level below that is, what is spirituality? Like, could we agree on a definition for that? So that's number 1. Number 2 is, who is this podcast for? Because it might not be for you. I hope it is. I hope we align, but I want to carve out my audience. And if you resonate with that, hopefully we could keep doing, this. And then lastly, I want to cast vision for the future of like what you can really expect to see on this podcast, and some of the things that we're going to be jumping into. And hopefully you can get to know me a little better, and we can kind of build a relationship. So let's start with spirituality. Spirituality, like, what is it? What does that mean? When I say spirituality, I'm not talking about organized religion, although I believe that to be a subset of spirituality. When I say spirituality, what I'm saying is the innate desire for humanity to find meaning and make sense of life on a deeper level below just the surface of things. I think that's been true of us as a race, as a species. For as long as we have record of human existence, we've always been looking for the meaning of life. We've always been looking to understand life. And you look out into the world today, we still have that same longing, that same desire. We join religious organizations. We tap into different ways of making sense of life, right? Like science would be a way to understand the material reality. Psychology helps us understand the realm of our mind and how we have relationships with other people. We have relationship coaches. Matter of fact, in our day and age, we have a lot of mystical practices as well, right? We have New Age community, people who are really into the law of attraction, the secret, manifestation, people who are really into like astrology. What does the stars have to say to us about life? Numerology, the same thing. Like, what patterns do numbers create that allow us to better understand life? We have people who claim that they can heal other people through energy, light, sound. We got Reiki. We have all of these different explorations of spirituality. And so to me, it's very clear that we are spiritual by nature. Like, we don't have to try very hard to want to understand things and experience life on a deeper, conscious, fulfilling, and hopefully intelligent level. And so that, to me, is spirituality. That's spirituality. Now, what about the intelligence component, right? It's spiritual intelligence for dummies. Spiritual intelligence. For me, when I look out into the spiritual space in our generation right now, I believe that there is somewhat of a dissonance and somewhat of a deficit in terms of intelligence, more specifically spiritual intelligence. I see a lot of, and not everyone is like this. Like, I'm trying to be nuanced. Not everyone's like this, but there's a lot of, cultish communities. There's a lot of dogma involved. There's a ton of blind faith. I don't care what, spiritual practice you subscribe to. There's a lot of blind faith. And I think it sets people up for failure instead of setting them up for success. And so my hope is I want to elevate the spiritual intelligence of the world, maybe one person at a time. Maybe we could grow this thing, but I really want to elevate the spiritual intelligence of the world because I think it would serve us and help us to live a more fulfilling life, and yeah, fulfilling, meaningful, and purposeful life. So that's spiritual intelligence. Like, how could we navigate this? How could we have conversations that people don't want to have, that people are too lazy to have, that people, when they have these conversations, they might even be a little disingenuous in their perspective or even their logic behind things? I want to talk about all of it because I think if we could wrestle it out, right? Lean into the friction, we would come out with something that's more true and something that's better and more beneficial for everybody. That's my hope, anyways. So that's spiritual intelligence. What about the dummies, right? Why are we dummies? Because it's my belief that if you want to grow in intelligence in any capacity or wisdom, you have to do it as a dummy, right? You have to acknowledge that you don't know the thing that you want to know. We can't assume or presume that we know it or we will know it. It's not a given, right? It's not an entitlement, right? We have to earn it by way of, you know, interpreting and wrestling through the things of life the right way, right? We got to show up. We can't, bypass. Oh, God. Spiritual bypassing is a huge problem, right? We can't spiritually bypass. We have to do the work. We have to get in there and really talk about these things. And the best way to do that, the most productive way to do that is do it as a novice. Do it as a dummy. Because on some level, man, knowledge, status, power, it's relative, right? Compared to what? Like, I know a lot compared to what, right? I think in the grand scheme of the universe, the cosmos, everything that's out there, we don't know a lot. We know what we know. Like, I definitely don't want to gaslight ourselves, right? And pretend like we don't know something that we do know. So that's false humility. We don't want that. But at the same time, I want us to be humble, like actually humble about the things that we don't know. So we're dummies. Like on this podcast, if you're watching this and you're in line with what we got going on here, welcome. We're dummies. So, yeah. So who is this podcast for? Other than dum-dums, who is this podcast for? Well, I really want to reach people who are, first of all, spiritually seeking, right? Spiritually curious. Like, they have an appetite for something deeper. They're really curious about the things that people talk about. Like, when people say law of attraction, they're like, okay, I'm a little skeptical. Is this real, and how real is it? And why is it real? Like, stuff like that, right? Like, when we have people who can heal other people by putting their hands on it and there's like energy, like, is that for real, or is that some, like made up garbage that people are buying into? And if it is real, how does it work? Like, could we dig into that? Because it can't be arbitrary, right? There's order and principles that ring true consistently in this universe, right? It's why. So if you're a seeker, this podcast is definitely for you. The other audience I want to reach is people who are disillusioned by the spiritual space. This I'm really passionate about. People who, when they look out into the people who are leaders in the spiritual space, they might feel like there's a little dissonance. There's a disconnect. Like, for example, let's say you're a relationship coach and you're very spiritual in how you practice it. If I look at what you do and then I look at your life, and your life is full of broken relationships, that's full of toxicity, there are no boundaries, there's no connection, no intimacy. If that is what I see, but what I hear is the exact opposite, that is very disillusioning. There you go. That's very disillusioning. And it's confusing for people. And I want to be able to talk about that. I want to be able to create a space where we could be honest, and hopefully you could come out of this disillusionment about the spiritual space, because I think, to be fair to you, there's a lot of garbage out there. There's a lot of people who say one thing, but they live something completely different. There's a lot of people who want to live that way, but they don't have the authority, right? They actually haven't earned the right to talk from a position of authority, and it's reflected in the quality of their life. And so if that's a spiritual space now, on top of the fact that, right, the intelligence piece, right? I should never just expect you to accept what I'm telling you without, a reasonable rationale, right? The spiritual space has thrown out logic altogether, and it's not good for us. It's not healthy. We're not trying to domesticate spirituality, to just cerebral intelligence. That's why it's spiritual intelligence. But intelligence is consistent in its nature, whatever plane of existence you're thinking about it from, right? Whether it's the material space, whether it's the emotional space, whether it's the spiritual space, principles work because it is what it is. It's in the principle. And so if that's you, right, you're just sick of it. You're sick of it. Well, I want to invite you to become sick of it here on this podcast, because we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have the conversations you wish you could have had in your communities. And we're going to go deep, 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 deep. And we're going to go high, 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 high. But we're also going to go low. And we're going to do it humbly. And yeah, so if you align with any of those things, please follow this podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, wherever you're listening from, so that we can stay connected, build a relationship and continue doing this, because I want to grow the community of spiritually intelligent people and elevate spiritual intelligence of the world. And lastly, what can you expect, right? Why should you keep watching? Other than the stuff I just said, well, really, I want to dive into really deep, really niche, really current spiritual topics, right? All the way from psychology to quantum physics to mysticism, things that seem like magic, really, like law of attraction, right? Like, is that real? Like, does it work? And if so, how? Why? And can you explain it in a way that, isn't dogmatic? It's not just a take my word for it. Like, it's somewhat substantiated. Like, could we have those conversations? I want to, and I think we're going to. So we're going to be digging into fun topics. I also want to bring on guests, right? I'm going to do a lot of solo episodes, but I really want to bring on guests. And I think the guests are going to add a lot of value and kind of expand the conversation for us. We're going to have guests, experts, leaders, and friends. I like to have a lot of fun. And so if you catch me on an episode with my friends, we're probably going to be making a ton of jokes. And they may or may not be at the expense of some of these people who are, kind of dogmatic and maybe even disingenuous, because I don't like that. And listen, I'll make fun of myself too. Nothing's off the table. Nobody should be above reproach. But the whole point of jokes is we're making light of it, right? We're having fun, and we're bringing things back down to a human level where we could just laugh about it and be like, you know what? This is silly, and that's fine. Let's just appreciate how silly this is, laugh about it, and get to the reality of the matter, get to the truth of the matter. And so we're going to be having fun, okay? We're going to be cracking jokes. We're going to be poking holes. We're going to be creating theories, and we're going to be digging deep into everything pertaining to spirituality in our day. Nothing's off topic. Nothing's off, nothing's off limits. Yeah. Nothing's off limits. And so, again, I'm really glad. I mean, if you watched to the end of this episode, like right now, thank you. I really appreciate that. And if this is in alignment with what's in your heart and what you are passionate about, what you care about, please join me for the next episode. And I will see you next week.